As we age, many of us find ourselves pondering questions about intimacy, desire, and self-care. It's common to wonder about how our needs for connection and pleasure might evolve over the years. However, the fear of being judged or misunderstood often prevents us from voicing these thoughts. In this video, we'll delve into the sensitive and often overlooked subject of sexuality in old age, exploring how it shapes our well-being and sense of self. Guided by the experiences of those who have navigated this journey, such as Donna Esperanza and Don Anselmo, we will uncover the importance of self-compassion, intimacy, and acceptance at any stage of life. The importance of self-compassion and intimacy in later years' sexuality is an integral part of our human experience. For many, it remains a vital aspect of emotional health, even as we age. This video aims to show you that aging does not mean the end of desire or intimacy. Instead, embracing our desires with dignity can lead to better emotional balance, reduced anxiety, and improved sleep. By hearing from those who have walked this path, you'll gain a new perspective on aging, self-care, and why pleasure is timeless. These stories are not only for the elderly, but for everyone who seeks to understand the deeper aspects of their own well-being. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, I encourage you to do so and activate the notification bell so that you won't miss future videos. Your support is invaluable, and if you find the content helpful, please consider liking and sharing it to help us reach a wider audience. A personal question. Marcos had been struggling with an issue that, despite its importance, felt too intimate to share with anyone. Wrestling with his personal concerns in silence, he had long wondered about the role of masturbation in old age, but the fear of shame made it difficult for him to voice the question. One afternoon, after much inner turmoil, he finally gathered the courage to approach Donna Esperanza, a woman known for her warmth, wisdom, and kindness. His cheeks flushed with nervousness and his voice trembled as he asked, "Can I ask you something personal? I've been wondering about masturbation in old age." Her response was immediate, yet tender. With a gentle smile, she reassured him with the comforting presence she was known for. Donna Esperanza had lived through many seasons of life, and, with her usual grace, she shared a deeply personal story that was both vulnerable and empowering. Embracing desire later in life. "I remember well," she began, "the uncertainty and self-doubt I felt when I first started thinking about this issue. I was already in my 70s, a time when the world around me seemed to slow down. My children, now adults, had moved on to lead their own lives, and my grandchildren were growing into young adults, creating families of their own. Suddenly, I found myself in a quiet solitude. The house that once echoed with laughter and activity became a place of reflection, where I spent hours alone with my thoughts, memories, and the unmistakable awareness of how my body had changed over the years." Donna paused, her voice tinged with emotion as she reflected on the shame she once felt. "At first I was overwhelmed with embarrassment. Could a woman my age, who had lived so many years, still feel desire? It seemed improper, almost forbidden, to entertain such thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore them, these feelings didn't disappear. They were part of me, and eventually, I realized that I owed it to myself to explore them." The role of self-care in sexuality. Taking a deep breath, Donna Esperanza continued, "I spoke to my doctor, a compassionate woman, who assured me that what I was experiencing was completely natural. Sexuality doesn't expire. It's woven into the fabric of our lives, from our youth to our twilight years." Armed with this reassurance, I began my journey of self-exploration. I won't lie to you, it wasn't easy at first. There were moments when I felt lost in a sea of doubt, questioning whether I had the right to seek pleasure at this stage in life. She smiled softly, as if recalling the transformation. But something beautiful happened. Little by little, As I allowed myself to embrace my desires, I discovered that masturbation wasn't just about physical pleasure. It became an intimate act of self-care, a sacred time for me to reconnect with my body, my emotions, and myself. In those quiet moments, I felt alive, not as an old woman resigned to the passage of time, but as someone still capable of joy and passion. The healing power of self-compassion. Reflecting on her experience, Donna continued, I began to notice subtle changes. My anxiety, which had once been a constant companion, began to melt away. Restless nights turned into peaceful slumbers. Perhaps most profoundly, I started to view my body with a sense of love and acceptance. The wrinkles and lines that marked my skin, symbols of aging, became testaments to the life I had lived. Each one told a story of strength, resilience, and survival. She gazed at Marcos with deep sincerity. Masturbation taught me more than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about satisfying a need. It was about embracing who I am, flaws and all. It taught me the importance of self-compassion, of treating myself with the same kindness I've always extended to others. I learned that pleasure isn't bound by age. We all deserve to experience the joy our bodies can bring, regardless of how many years we've walked this earth. Breaking the silence on aging and sexuality. Donna's words hung in the air, filled with emotion and wisdom, leaving Marcos comforted and enlightened. Her story wasn't just an answer to his question. It was a testament to the beauty of self-discovery and the transformative power of accepting one's desires, even in the later stages of life. Of course, she added with a knowing smile, not everyone around me understood my perspective. There were whispers, sideways glances, and people who were quick to criticize, casting opinions on matters they could never fully grasp. But despite the judgments, despite the moments of isolation, I stood firm in my conviction. I realized that sexuality is not just for the young. It's an integral part of being human. It's woven into the very fabric of our existence, a force that connects us to ourselves in profound ways. The power of acceptance. Donna leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Marcos, as if urging him to internalize her next words. In the end, what truly matters, what transcends all the noise and opinions of others, is how we feel about ourselves, our bodies, our desires, and our experiences. They belong to us, and to us alone. So Marcos, she said softly, don't let shame or guilt weigh you down. Your desires are not something to hide or deny. Masturbation in old age, as in any other stage of life, can be a source of profound well-being and self-discovery. It's an act of listening to your body, respecting it, and allowing yourself to savor the pleasures life still offers. A new perspective on aging and sexuality. Marcos sat in silence, feeling the weight of her words settle over him like a balm. Slowly, he nodded, the tension that had weighed on him for weeks beginning to melt away. For the first time, he realized that both life and sexuality were deeply personal, unique journeys, ones that were not dictated by societal expectations or the ticking of time. They were about self-care, self-respect, and most importantly, honoring one's connection with the body and soul. Embracing desire at any age, Marcos and Donna Esperanza's wisdom. As we age, certain desires and needs don't simply vanish, they evolve. For many, these needs, once thought of as exclusive to youth, become more significant as we grow older. They are not luxuries, but essentials for thriving at every stage of life. This realization stayed with Marcos long after his conversation with Donna Esperanza. Her words became a reminder to him that the journey of self-love and self-understanding never truly ends. It simply transforms, growing richer and deeper with time. Marcos embraced Donna Esperanza's wisdom, letting it guide him through his own life. Her perspective on intimacy and self-care was an awakening, a constant reassurance that age does not negate the human capacity for desire and connection. Whether he acknowledged it consciously or not, his heart had been opened to a new understanding of his own journey toward self-acceptance. Don Ancelo, a different story, yet the same truth. Meanwhile, not far from where Marcos lived in the quiet village, there was Don Ancelo, a 75-year-old man whose infectious sense of humor and storytelling had made him a beloved figure. His ability to weave tales that entertained yet made people reflect was his trademark. In a community where stories had the power to both lift spirits and spark contemplation, Don Ancelo's words carried weight, stirring thoughts that stayed with his listeners long after they had left his company. One sunny afternoon, Don Ancelo sat sipping his coffee in the village plaza when Sophia, an old childhood friend, approached him. Though the years had passed, her youthful glow still lingered in her face. But today, there was something different about her, a certain vulnerability in her eyes, a hesitation in her voice as she settled beside him. After a few moments of light conversation, Sophia sighed deeply, her cheeks turning pink as she spoke. "I've been feeling confused lately about my body and my sexuality," she confessed quietly, glancing down at her hands. "I never thought I'd be thinking about this at my age, but here I am, feeling ashamed and unsure. Is this normal?" She glanced up at him, her face now flushed. "Can I ask you something, Don Ancelo? What do you think about masturbation at our age?" Comfort and understanding, Don Ancelo's perspective. Don Ancelo chuckled softly, not in mockery, but with the understanding of someone who had lived long enough to know the complexities of life. He placed his hand gently on hers, his touch warm and reassuring. "Sophia," he said, his voice steady, "you and I have lived long enough to know that the heart and the body never truly stop feeling, no matter how many years we've walked this earth. The world may tell us that old age is a time to fade into the background, to let go of things like desire, pleasure, and connection. But I don't believe that for a second. Our bodies, just like our hearts, are still alive with need, with longing, with the ability to feel deeply and profoundly." He paused, giving her time to absorb his words. Masturbation, like many things in life, isn't about the age we are. It's about staying connected to ourselves, to our bodies. It's about recognizing that the need for intimacy, whether with another person or with ourselves, is a part of who we are. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. "In fact," he said, his eyes twinkling with a knowing smile, "it's something to celebrate." Sophia looked at him, her expression softening as the weight of her embarrassment began to lift. In Don Ancelo's words, she found not only comfort, but also validation. She wasn't alone in her feelings, and there was no need for shame. Life, as Don Ancelo had often reminded her through his stories, was meant to be lived fully, with joy, humor, and a deep connection to one's true self, right up until the very end. As they sat together in the plaza, the sun shining down on them, Sophia felt a sense of peace settle over her. She understood now that, just like Marcos had learned from Donna Esperanza, there was nothing wrong with embracing one's desires. Regardless of age, what mattered most was how she felt about herself. And in that moment, she felt free. Personal reflections. Don Ancelo's own journey. Sophia had not expected the conversation to take such a turn. The questions that had plagued her mind for so long seemed less daunting now, and she felt lighter, knowing that someone like Don Ancelo, who had witnessed so much in life, could speak with such clarity and wisdom on the matter. Yet Don Ancelo wasn't done sharing. With a warm and understanding smile, he gently placed his hand on Sophia's once more. His touch was filled with empathy, knowing the unease she had felt only moments before. He took a deep breath before deciding to share a piece of his own story, one that he had kept private for many years. "Sophia, my dear friend," he began softly. "I understand your concerns all too well. Society has ingrained in us the belief that sexuality is reserved for the young, that once we reach a certain age, we are no longer allowed to feel desire or seek pleasure. But the truth, my friend, is far more complex and beautiful than that." Don Ancelo's face softened as he recalled the time after his wife's passing, just a few years earlier. "After I lost my beloved wife, I was plunged into a deep loneliness. My children had moved far away to live their own lives, and though they visited when they could, most days I was left alone with my thoughts. The house that once echoed with love and laughter became quiet. In that silence, I began to reflect not only on my emotional state, but also on my physical and intimate needs." He paused, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "At first, the idea of masturbation at my age felt strange. I won't lie, I was uncomfortable. I thought it was inappropriate, that perhaps I had no right to feel these desires anymore. I wrestled with the shame of it, the voice in my head telling me I was too old, that intimacy and pleasure were things I should have left behind with my youth. But as I sat alone in that quiet house, I began to reflect deeper. I realized that the need for intimacy, for connection, for pleasure, these are not things that disappear with age. They are part of who we are, part of being human. A journey of liberation, overcoming guilt and embracing pleasure." Don Ancelo looked at Sofia, his gaze steady, filled with the understanding of someone who had lived through similar struggles. "One night, after a particularly long and lonely day, I decided to set aside my discomfort and permit myself to explore this side of myself again. At first it felt awkward. I didn't know how to relax into it. I was clumsy and unsure of what I was doing or how it would make me feel. But little by little, as I let go of the guilt and the fear, I began to relax. I allowed myself to be present in the moment, and something incredible happened. I felt a sense of liberation, a peace I hadn't experienced in years." His eyes grew misty as he continued, reflecting on the profound impact this act of self-care had on his life. It wasn't about the physical sensation alone. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that I had forgotten. The shame that had weighed on me dissipated. I began to feel alive again. I was reminded that my needs, my desires, were valid. The joy I had once experienced was still accessible, even in the later years of life. The power of self-acceptance. Sofia sat in silence, absorbing his words. She could feel the weight of her own embarrassment lifting, replaced with a deep sense of understanding. Don Ancelo had not only validated her feelings, but also helped her see that her desires were natural and worthy of exploration, regardless of her age. She felt a sense of freedom in this realization, knowing that she could embrace her own desires without shame. In that moment, both Sofia and Don Ancelo shared something profound, an understanding that intimacy, self-love, and pleasure are not confined to any one stage of life. They are timeless, essential parts of the human experience, available to us at any age. The journey of self-care and reconnection. As Don Ancelo shared his story with Sofia, the warmth in his voice and the sincerity in his words were clear indicators of the depth of his understanding. "It wasn't just about the physical pleasure, Sofia," he said. "It was about reclaiming a part of myself that I thought had been lost. Masturbation became for me a way of caring for myself, a way of connecting with my body in a way that was gentle, respectful, and loving." Over time, Don Ancelo noticed profound changes in his life. It helped me manage the stress and anxiety that had been building up inside me. I felt calmer and more relaxed. I slept better at night, free from the restless thoughts that used to keep me awake. He gave Sofia's hand a reassuring squeeze before continuing. "But more than that, This practice helped me to accept the changes in my body with grace and dignity. I stopped looking at my aging body with disdain, and instead, I began to appreciate it for all that had carried me through. The wrinkles, the stiffness, the slower pace. They weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of a life well lived. Reconnecting with body, mind, and spirit. Masturbation allowed me to reconnect with myself, Don Ancelo continued, his tone deepening with sincerity. Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally too. It taught me to love myself in ways I hadn't known I could. Sophia, listening intently, felt the weight of his vulnerability. His openness touched her deeply. She no longer felt embarrassed or ashamed about her own feelings. Instead, a profound sense of understanding and relief washed over her. She wasn't alone in her struggles. She wasn't the only one facing the challenges of aging, sexuality, and self-worth. "Thank you, Don Ancelo," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never expected to feel this way at my age, but hearing your story gives me hope and permission to embrace this part of myself without shame." Embracing the body and mind, Don Ancelo's wisdom. Don Ancelo smiled warmly at her, his face softening with compassion. "Sophia, there's no shame in seeking pleasure and caring for yourself. No matter how old we are, our bodies may change, but our need for love, connection, and self-compassion never does. Age is just a number. What matters is how we feel inside." He leaned in slightly, his voice steady, but filled with affection. "So don't deny yourself the right to explore your intimacy, to find joy in your own body. It's a gift that you deserve at any stage of life." In that moment, sitting together in the plaza under the bright sunlight, Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Don Ancelo's words had given her the courage to embrace her desires, to seek pleasure without guilt, and to honor her body with the love and respect it deserved. The shift in perspective, understanding the true beauty of living. As they finished their coffee, Sophia no longer felt like an aging woman questioning her worth. She felt like someone who was still growing, still learning, still discovering new depths within herself. She had come to understand that the true beauty of living lies in continual self-discovery, no matter how many years one has lived. The journey of self-acceptance and self-love never really ends. Masturbation in old age has been one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life, Don Ancelo began, his voice filled with gentle wisdom. It taught me that pleasure doesn't come with an expiration date, and that taking care of oneself in every sense is vital for a truly fulfilling life. He paused, letting his words sink in. We spend so much of our younger years worrying about others' expectations, about what's appropriate, that we often forget to show kindness to ourselves. But through this practice, I came to realize that I deserve the same compassion and understanding I would offer to a dear friend. My desires, my needs, they're not something to feel guilt or shame over. The importance of self-acceptance. Sophia listened closely, understanding now that her own feelings were not something to suppress or feel ashamed of. The notion of embracing pleasure, even in old age, seemed less foreign and more natural. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, Don Ancelo added, please comment 3 below to let me know you are still here with me. He smiled knowingly, glancing at Sophia as he continued. Of course, there will always be those who don't understand, who judge or cast their opinions without truly knowing. But Sophia, I've learned something important in all these years. The only opinion that truly matters is how we feel about ourselves. Life is too fleeting, too precious, to spend it weighed down by fear or regret. We owe it to ourselves to live fully without denying the parts of us that crave love, intimacy, and connection. Whether it's with someone else or with ourselves. He leaned in slightly, his words gaining emphasis. So, Sophia, I say this with all the care in my heart. Don't ever be ashamed of your desires. Masturbation, even in old age, is not just a way to satisfy a need. It's a healthy, natural way to maintain both physical and emotional well-being. It keeps us in tune with our bodies, helps us listen to what we need, and allows us to find comfort and joy in the simplest pleasures. No matter how many years we've lived, we still deserve to enjoy the pleasures that life has to offer. Your age doesn't define your worth, nor does it define your right to feel. The shift within, Sophia's moment of realization. Sophia sat quietly, absorbing Don Ancelo's heartfelt words. She had come to him with uncertainty and hesitation, unsure of how to reconcile her feelings with the image of how she thought she was supposed to be at her age. But as she listened, she felt something shift inside her, a sense of peace, a deep validation. The weight of shame that had settled so heavily on her chest began to lighten. She realized that her sexuality, her need for intimacy and pleasure, was as natural and important now as it had ever been. It wasn't something to hide or feel guilty about, but something to embrace with tenderness and self-compassion. As Don Ancelo's words continued to echo in her mind, Sophia felt a newfound sense of freedom blossoming within her. From that day on, she vowed to treat herself with more care and love. Following the example of her old friend, she would no longer deny her desires or be ashamed of her body's needs. Instead, she would honor herself, knowing that true fulfillment comes from accepting and loving oneself completely at any age. The true journey, cultivating self-love. Don Ancelo watched her with a warm, understanding smile. He could see that Sophia had found the comfort and clarity she had been seeking. In that moment, both of them understood a profound truth. Life's greatest journey is not just in seeking external love, but in cultivating a deep and unwavering love for oneself. As we reflect on the beautiful conversation between Don Ancelo and Sophia, we are reminded that self-compassion and self-acceptance are essential at every stage of life. Sexuality, intimacy, and self-care do not have an age limit. They are part of who we are, no matter how many years we've lived.